Good afternoon. This is Marie from Mercy Med, and today we're going to be talking about sodium. And the reason we're talking about sodium is salt intake really affects a lot of people with a lot of different problems like high blood pressure, kidney problems, congestive heart failure. And as a general rule, our diabetics have to watch their sodium intake. And so one of the first things people will say is, how much is too much salt? And typically we'll tell most people they can have 2,000 milligrams in a day. And if they're really sick, we may cut it back to 1,500. But we usually try to say 2 grams or 2,000 milligrams in a day. But a lot of times we get salt in our diet and we're not even trying it. And so today I'm going to show you some examples of foods that have salt, which ones have less salt than the other, to help you make better choices. And sometimes it's kind of tricky. We know, that, for example, that if I eat a fresh apple or water, these don't have any sodium because they're just as they are. So these would be good low sodium choices. However, the more something is processed, the more sodium that's in it. And for example, I took a thing of broccoli that's frozen, so this is easy to keep. And if you look on the back, on the nutrition side, of course it's going to say there's 4 servings in here, so you just keep that in mind. But if you look at the sodium, it's only 10 milligrams. So 10, even if you did the whole pack, would be 40, which is not much out of 2,000. So you can see the more close to natural it is, the less it is. However, if I start putting seasoning or sauces on it, and let me see, I've got one here. This is a broccoli with cheese sauce. So now we've added something to the broccoli. And if you look at the back, and it's not a bad choice, but if you look at the sodium, that has 380. So if you're looking at 380 here, and we're looking at 10 milligrams here, there's a big difference. So they do add up over time. Another example is the oatmeal. If you get a ready oatmeal that you're cooking yourself, a serving size has 0 milligrams of sodium. But if you get the prepared oatmeal, like in a can here or in a cup, you can see that the sodium in this is 170. So you have 170 here to 0. So sometimes it's just little simple changes that can make a big difference, even though you're eating some of the same foods. The other thing that I can tell you is sometimes healthy foods will look like should be low sodium. And I'm going to give you an example. This is, my son loves these Marie Callender bowls. And it looks pretty good. It says it's got vegetables, beef pot roast, so it's got that. It's actually calorie-wise, not bad. The whole thing is not 220. Carbohydrates aren't bad, but the sodium content is 790. So that's almost just about a half a day's amount. So if you just ate this, you've eaten about half your daily amount of your sodium. And just remember, with sodium, you're going to have increased fluid retention, blood pressure can go up and things like that. Another one, and this might be a little bit easier to see, is the beef broccoli. And this particular sodium count is 810. So the big thing that I'm getting out of things is kind of watch and know that even things that you would not think would have sodium, for example, my grandbabies like popcorn balls, especially with it being Halloween. And so I would think, well, that's popcorn, that's got corn syrup, so it would be a little bit sweet. So you really wouldn't think about it having much as far as sodium. But it has 115 milligrams. So here goes something that I would not have typically thought of having salt in it, but it does. So that's just an example there.
Fiddler Drew is watching. You can say hello to Fiddler.
Hey, how are you? Um, so anyway, the biggest things that they'll tell us to do is, and I've got a few hints here, is a lot of people, when I tell them to be on a low sodium diet, and they'll say to me, they'll say, but I'm not using the salt shaker, and that's good, that's very good, and that's a good thing to do. Make sure you're not adding the salt when you're cooking. You know, some things that are really good at seasoning, some people like a little bit of lemon or lime. Some vinegars will do good. I know I like a lot of onions and bell peppers and things added in it, but you'll know your own personal taste. But try doing different, like herbs and some of those type things to help with it. Now, one caution, some people will use the salt substitutes, especially if they were told to watch their salt, but those are high in potassium. And so if you have any troubles with high potassium or kidney problems, you need to be very careful because they do have an extra amount of potassium in them. Some of the seasonings that are high in sodium would be like your bouillon cubes, and that makes kind of sense. Meat tenderizers, soy sauce, steak sauce, and Worcestershire sauce. And I'm thinking also sometimes if we're doing the Oriental type cooking, would be like your fish sauce and things like that you can add to it. It tells us to avoid pre-seasoned mixes, pretzels, potato chips, olives, pickles, and fast foods. So that's a whole bunch of processed. Some things that we can do too is like if I have a can of green beans or something like that, they're not terrible, but and they do have a little bit of sodium. You can rinse those off. Like this has 160 milligrams, so if you rinsed it a little bit, you could. And the green beans are really probably not bad at all. If you're looking at this, because I know sometimes it can be hard if things aren't in season, but the sodium on this is 290. But if you take a colander and rinse it off, you can rinse away some of that sodium, so it's not so bad. Other things is it says watch things such as some of your soups. And I brought a couple of cans of soups. I brought, let's see what I've got here. I've got a vegetable beef soup, and now remember, this is going to be fixed with your can of water, and so they're going to say that this whole can is 2.5 servings. So just remember, whatever I say, if you're eating the whole can, multiply it by 2.5. But the sodium content for one serving is 890 milligrams. So be really careful with this, because these are some of the little things. You may think you're doing really good, but you're getting a whole lot of sodium. And even the tomato soup, because I was thinking, tomato soup, who would think tomato soup has a lot of sodium? But this has 480. So just know that a lot of the soups and things do. And then sometimes people will get some of the canned foods like the tuna and things like this, and this is actually packed in water, so I would think that would be a healthier choice than packed in oil, and it's protein, but it does have 360 milligrams of salt, so it's not as bad, but you could definitely rinse that a little bit more to try to get a little bit of the extra sodium off. Our processed breads and things, and I just happened to, because it's the fall season. I got a pumpkin spice muffins that say somebody wants one in the morning. Well, if you look at the bag and you look at one muffin, so that's one serving size, that has 210 milligrams of sodium. So that's about 1/10 of your sodium for the day. So what I'm saying is we are going to get salt in our diet. You can't avoid it. It's just trying to cut back and make the wisest choices. And sometimes it's just good to remember to read the labels like we were talking about last time to see how much is in there. So if I choose to do one of these, during the day, then I'm gonna have to know that the rest of the day I'm gonna have to make pretty low choices as far as sodium content. Drinking water is a good choice. I actually do have a sugar-free drink for some that say, but I don't want water, I want something else. You can find some of them. I went actually found this one at Walmart, and it doesn't have any calories, no carbohydrates, and would you believe, no sodium? Because a lot of your sodas do have sodium. So you can look, but it's just a matter of reading those labels and finding out what's there. And sometimes you'll even see at the front of it, it'll say low sodium or no sodium. So that's a big thing. A lot of times with blood pressure and with heart failure and different things, we'll give some diuretics, which will help us to get rid of the extra fluid, and sometimes we'll urinate off some of the salt and things like that because of with the salt we do retain. Does anybody have any questions out there? Is there anything that doesn't make sense?
We're waiting for their questions. I would say so you might have to repeat the question. How does someone know if they're having too much salt in their diet? How would you feel?
Yeah, do you know what kind of symptoms you would have if you were having too much salt in your diet?
I don't think they know. What would they do?
Well, you can find one of the easiest things is people will say, I can feel swelling. My hands and feet feel really swollen. Some people will say, I'm so thirsty. I can't get enough to drink. I feel like I'm dry as the Sahara. Other people will start actually getting more fluid. Some people will get it all the way up in their legs, their abdomen. And if you have really bad heart failure, you can actually get to where you're short of breath and coughing and have a really frothy sputum when you're coughing.
Oh. Marie, are you going to go back to doing live classes? Elizabeth was wondering how her mother-in-law could come.
I would be glad to. I just need to check with the office and see when they feel like we can put them into the front area.
They probably can't hear me talking, so they would say, how could someone get into one of your classes?
How can someone get into one of my classes? Well, right now we're doing it via Facebook, but I will talk with Dr. Kim and Dr. Scarborough and find out if it's okay for us to allow people in. I definitely would want to make sure that they're not somebody that would feel like they were at risk. If it is, we would have to go every other seat and have people use their mask and just avoid a lot of hand contact. But I can find out about that.
You could also mention, starting January, we plan to have educational classes for the community, SNAP Ed classes.
We are also getting ready to, in January, we're getting a dietitian that's going to be coming to help with some of the SNAP Ed education classes, and we would be glad to have them come in. One of the things I think is our diet is so important for so much, and we do have to use our budget, and that's why I tried to come up with a bunch of different things. We do have some fresh vegetables. Farmer Keith is doing, and that's always a good thing. Like I said, we can use some fresh, we can use some frozen and canned. It's just a matter of making the best choices with the least amount, and then rinsing and balancing it out over time, and kind of just keeping a tab at first. You'll get to be so good at this if you read labels that you can almost pick the things that have the most sodium.
Cool. You can ask and see if anybody has any more questions.
Does anybody have any more questions?
I would just say you can point out on the farm, you've got those hot peppers behind you.
Okay.
Because that's a good, sodium flavor.
Yeah. And we were talking about seasoning and making things not taste bland, because people will say to me, "Oh, Miss Marie, why are you taking away my salt? My food's going to be just bland and no flavor." Well, you can see he's got some of the hot peppers that are growing, and if you like things a little spicy, you could add that to it. Sometimes, like I said before, we could do a little bit of the vinegars. You can actually put a little bit of some of the herbs. Some people like rosemary or thyme or basil.
Basil right behind you.
Yeah, and there's some basil over here. So there's all sorts of different herbs that can be used for seasoning. Some people even like a little cinnamon and different things. So there's a ton of things that can be used. Onions, I love green onions and bell pepper. For me, I like red peppers too. Does anybody out there have a favorite seasoning that they like to use?
Ooh, let's see if they put something in. Yeah.
Some of the dry mustards.
That gives it a kick. Okay, awesome. Anything else for today?
Well, I would just say continue to think about what you're eating. There's no such thing as a bad food. It's just making the best choices over time. And remember that God gave us food to eat, to live, but we don't live to eat. So just don't beat yourself up. If today you stumble, pick it up in the morning, and just keep going on. And we learn from our mistakes. I know I have, and just it's over time. And don't try to take and to do everything in one day. Make a good choice, a step at a time.
All right, that's beautiful. All right, thank you so much.
I don't know if that was good or
Thank
not.
you and bye.
Bye.